Most people don't crash at rock bottom, they crash at the top, quietly. You can be successful and still feel like a fraud. You can lead the team, launch the product, post the highlight reel, and still sit alone in your car wondering why none of it feels like it's landing. That's not burnout, that's not imposter syndrome. That's what happens when your success outpaces your soul. We live in a world obsessed with momentum. Build faster, scale harder, be more visible, more followed, more impressive. But no one asks the one question that really matters. Is the person you're becoming strong enough to carry the life you're building? This is the climb that breaks you or builds you up. Most people don't fall because they weren't capable, and they fall because they constructed something massive on a version of themselves that was still half-formed. They rose in title, in reach, in visibility, but they forgot to deepen the foundation. John Maxwell said, "The higher you want to climb, the more you need leadership. The greater the impact you want to make, the greater your influence needs to be." But influence isn't about how many people hear you, it's about what happens to them after they do. And that kind of influence doesn't come from confidence, it comes from clarity, from someone who didn't just rise, they rooted on the way up. Carl Jung would call it individuation, the psychological process of integrating everything you are, including the parts you hide, especially the parts you hide. Because when your ambition races ahead of your inner work, you're not building a mountain, you're stacking a tower on sand, and when the pressure comes, and it always comes, it doesn't crack the tower, it breaks you. Let's get honest. You ever hit a milestone and feel nothing? Open the champagne and wonder why you still feel stuck. That moment isn't failure, it's feedback. It's the whisper beneath the noise saying, you've built the life, but you forgot to build yourself to live it. You've been climbing. But what part of you is doing the climbing? Is it the part that's grounded in purpose, or the part that's desperate to prove? Because one of them will build a life that sustains you, and the other will build a life that starves you. Maxwell taught us to climb higher. Jung reminds us to dig deeper. Without both, the mountain will own you. So before you climb higher, pause. Ask, realign. Because the climb doesn't break people. It just reveals who was carrying their ego instead of their essence. He had everything: status, story, strength. Bellerophon didn't just slay monsters, he became one of the most celebrated heroes in ancient Greece, and when the world handed him glory, he believed it. He believed he wasn't just a man anymore, he was something more. So he mounted Pegasus, his winged horse, and soared toward Mount Olympus, toward godhood. But just before he arrived, Zeus sent a single sting, one flicker of divine resistance, and Bellerophon fell. Not because he wasn't courageous, but because he mistook success for transcendence. Because he flew too high on wings his character hadn't earned. This is when ego starts to lead. Carl Jung called it ego inflation, the psychological condition where the self fuses with the persona, where image becomes identity, where ambition is no longer guided by truth but by delusion. You stop asking questions, you start believing your own myth. And it's not just myth, it's modern life. You launch the business, you go viral, you hit your first 6 figures or 10 or more. You finally feel seen, and it tastes so good you don't notice you've stopped listening. Feedback feels like attack. Rest feels like weakness. Stillness feels like failure. Until one day it all gets quiet. Not the world, you. You stop feeling the joy. You stop feeling much at all. You hit a goal you've chased for years, and it lands with a hollow thud. You're not broken. You've just been building on applause instead of alignment. Simon Sinek said, when you compete against everyone else, no one wants to help you. But when you compete against yourself, everyone wants to help you. But ego doesn't want help. It wants certainty, it wants applause, it wants movement at all cost. Because motion means you don't have to sit still with who you've become. Let's interrupt the scroll for a second. You, right now, what part of you is doing the driving? The one still trying to prove something to a father who never said I'm proud? The one still chasing the version of yourself that existed before you failed? The one still hiding behind a brand because it's easier than showing people your real story? That part doesn't need to be erased, it needs to be integrated, because unexamined ambition doesn't disappear, it grows teeth. And eventually it will drag you into a version of life that looks incredible on the outside and eats you alive from within. You don't have to let that happen. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. and you will call it fate. This is your moment, not to stop building, but to start becoming, not to let go of the dream, but to finally become someone who's whole enough to carry it. Because if you keep letting ego lead, it'll keep chasing Olympus. But if you lead from wholeness, you'll build something even the gods can't touch. You start with vision, you start with purpose, but then the weight comes, the deadlines, the pressure, the people watching, and without realizing it, something shifts. You start gripping harder, you tighten the reins, you lead, not to serve, but to stay in control. This is the moment most leaders don't see coming, the moment the throne you sit on becomes the one you serve. Carl Jung called it the ruler archetype, the part of you that wants to build, direct, protect. When it's conscious, it brings clarity and structure, but when it's unconscious, it feeds on fear. Fear of being irrelevant, fear of losing control, fear that if you let go, everything, including you, might fall apart. It's subtle, you still sound composed. You still look like a leader, but something deeper has shifted. You start equating control with stability. You start confusing obedience with loyalty. You begin to believe that questioning you is betrayal, and you don't notice the damage until it's too late. Until the people who used to bring you truth go quiet, until the team that used to light up starts burning out, until the culture starts mimicking your blind spots instead of your strengths. You think you're protecting the mission, but really you're protecting an identity. This is what happens when leadership is driven by ego rather than essence. Jung warned that what we repress doesn't go away, that it governs us. If you don't confront the parts of yourself you fear, the insecurity, the self-doubt, the need to be right, you'll build systems that reinforce them. You'll become the kind of ruler who silences truth to preserve comfort. And here's the dangerous part, no one will call it out, because they're scared to lose access to your approval. And so the illusion grows. Simon Sinek said, "A star wants to see himself rise to the top. A leader wants to see those around him rise to the top." That's the dividing line. One leads to be seen, the other leads so others can see themselves. So ask yourself, right now, what's the real reason you want to lead? To create freedom, or to stay in control, to inspire others, or to be admired? Because the throne doesn't make the leader. Who you become while sitting on it does. And if you're not careful, you'll end up ruling something impressive, while slowly losing who you are. But there's another path. It's the path of the integrated ruler. The one who knows how to lead from within, who isn't afraid of feedback, who invites contradiction, who understands that real authority is built on humility, not dominance. This kind of leader doesn't cling to power, they hold space. They don't defend themselves from the truth, they grow from it. And that's the throne that actually lasts. The one that doesn't collapse when the title disappears, the one that remains even when the crown is gone. Let's talk about regret. Not the kind that's loud or dramatic, but the kind that creeps in when no one's watching. The kind that asks questions at night that your title can't answer. That's the kind of regret Ashoka met on the battlefield of Kalinga. He had it all: power, reach, command. He was the emperor of one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. And when resistance came, he did what he always did. He conquered, ruthlessly, efficiently. Over 100,000 lives ended, the war was won. But when the dust settled, he walked the battlefield. And in the silence of that aftermath, he saw something he couldn't unsee. The empire was intact, but he was not. He had succeeded at the cost of his own peace, and something broke. That break and that internal unraveling was the beginning of something greater. Ashoka didn't step down, he stepped inward. He didn't give up leadership. He transformed it. He embraced Dharma. He ruled with compassion. He built hospitals, wells, schools. He shifted from fear to service, from dominance to dignity. And that shift, that was individuation. Carl Jung called it the integration of the shadow, the process of becoming whole. The courage to confront not just your actions, but the parts of yourself that made those actions possible. It's not easy. It doesn't come with applause. But it's the only way to lead without leaving a trail of destruction behind you. This isn't a story about a king from history. This is your story if you're willing to listen. Maybe you haven't walked a battlefield, but maybe you've hit the number and felt nothing. Maybe you've stood at the top of what you built and wondered why it doesn't feel like home. Maybe you've noticed that the more successful you become, the less connected you feel. That's the whisper, the one that says, there's another way. Jim Collins found that the greatest leaders, the ones who built companies that endured, were not charismatic showmen. They were quiet, grounded, focused. They didn't need to be the center. They were the root, the anchor, the presence. Level 5 leaders, he called them. Fierce in will, humble in ego. Not because they lacked ambition, but because they had finally let go of the need to prove. They had already chosen who they wanted to become, and their leadership was simply an extension of that decision. So, here's the moment of truth. Are you still building to be seen, or are you becoming someone worth following even when no one's looking? Because the king who learns to kneel doesn't lose the crown, he redefines what it means to wear it. And in doing so, he becomes something rare, he becomes real. Ambition is sacred until it isn't, until the thing that once pulled you forward starts pulling you apart, until the fire you thought was lighting your way starts burning everything around you and within you. This is where most people lose the plot, not because they didn't try hard enough, but because they never stopped to ask what their ambition was built on. Carl Jung didn't demonize ambition, but he warned about the kind that grows without integration, the kind fueled by wounds instead of wisdom, the kind that looks like drive on the outside but is really just unresolved insecurity with a calendar and a pitch deck. And it works for a while. You grow, you scale, you perform. You keep saying yes because you're afraid that if you stop, you'll disappear. And you don't notice the quiet burnout, the spiritual fatigue, the creeping realization that your momentum is no longer a reflection of your mission. It's just motion. Then one day you arrive. The success you dreamed of is in front of you, and it feels empty. That emptiness is the cost of ambition without depth, the cost of building something so impressive you forgot to become someone you actually like living with. Jim Collins called this out in his research on great companies. He found that the most enduring leaders weren't obsessed with being impressive. They were obsessed with being effective in service of a purpose beyond themselves. He called them level 5 leaders. A rare fusion of fierce will and quiet humility. Builders who didn't just scale businesses, they scaled their own character. And the truth is, you can feel when someone's done that work. Their leadership feels different. There's no desperation in their eyes, no mask in their voice. They don't need to dominate the room because they're already grounded within it. Robert Greenleaf called this servant leadership, but don't confuse it for softness. It's strength that doesn't need to shout, power that doesn't seek attention, influence rooted in clarity, not control. And here's the part most people miss. Servant leadership isn't a technique, it's a transformation, one that starts when you stop performing your ambition and start purifying it. So let me ask you, is your ambition still about proving? Is it still about getting the thing that finally silences the voice that says you're not enough? Or has it become something deeper? Because until it does, no success will satisfy, no win will land, no title will feel like truth. You'll keep climbing and each peak will feel more hollow than the last. But when your ambition is rooted in integration, in self-awareness, in service, in something bigger than you, it doesn't burn you out. It becomes fuel, not for noise, but for meaning. And when that happens, you don't lose your edge. You sharpen your impact, because the edge was never the goal. The goal was to become someone who didn't need the edge to matter. That's what it means to lead with depth. And it's the only ambition that won't turn on you. Legacy isn't made when people are watching. It's made in the moments that don't make it to your calendar, the ones that don't trend, the ones that don't give you anything to post. Legacy happens in the pause before the reaction, in the decision no one else knows you made, in the quiet conviction that says, I won't lead from fear today. Carl Jung said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. But most of us are never taught how to look inside. We're taught to chase, to climb, to execute, and only when the noise dies down or the collapse begins do we start wondering what it was all for. So here's the real test of leadership. Who are you when no one's asking you to be impressive? Who are you when the meeting ends and the lights go down? Who are you when the brand isn't in the room and it's just you and your reflection? That's where legacy begins. It's not what you leave behind after the work is done. It's who you become while doing it. Because eventually the applause will fade, the algorithm will shift, The company will evolve, and all that's left will be the soul of the leader who once stood at the center. Was that soul whole, or was it still hiding? If you don't like your answer, don't panic, just pause, because the most powerful shift doesn't happen at your peak. It happens in your pivot, the moment you stop building from emptiness and start becoming someone who leads from essence. This is that moment. So ask yourself, honestly, what kind of legacy are you building? One that impresses or one that imprints? One that's driven by noise or one that's born from silence? If this message found you in the middle of your climb, share it. Someone you know is moving fast but hollow. Someone you love is building something massive on a foundation they haven't reinforced. Let this be their invitation back to the work that matters. And if that someone is you, then this isn't the end. It's the return to the climb that doesn't burn you out. It builds you, to the ambition that doesn't hide your wounds. It integrates them, to the leadership that doesn't demand applause. It earns trust in the quiet. This is your legacy, and it begins not with a shout, but with a whisper, the one that says, lead from within.